Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to today's DevOps.com program brought to you by Techstrong, Datadog, and AWS. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we do have an exciting presentation ahead. First, I need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, we'd like you to send those in to us using the Q&A on the right side of the screen. Over on that right side of the screen, you'll also see a chat tab, and I'd like you to start warming that up now. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I'd also like you to use that throughout today's program. If you hear something that you like, let us know in that chat tab. We'd like to hear kind of what you're pulling from this program. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around. The topic of our discussion today is how StitchFix simplified cloud cost monitoring and management with Datadog. And today, I'm joined by Kayla Taylor, Senior Product Manager at Datadog, and Martin Amps, Principal Engineer at StitchFix. Kayla, Martin, thank you both for being here. We'll go ahead and get you to turn your webcams on. And Kayla, would you like to get us kicked off?
That sounds great. Thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here today. So to quickly cover what we are going to talk about, first, we are going to discuss the evolving cloud environment. We'll talk a bit about Datadog's cloud cost management tool, and specifically how Martin here at StitchFix used that tool. And then we'll finish up with a Datadog on Datadog cost optimization story. So without further ado, let's dive in. So to start, let's talk about the evolving cloud cost environment. As you all know, the shift to the cloud has accelerated how we work and brought about digital transformation. Teams can now spin up infrastructure and launch applications at incredible speeds. And the clouds continue to innovate. They're launching new services all the time. But this has also brought about a lot of cost uncertainty, often due to things like unanticipated usage or wrong size production. And while teams can spin up infrastructure and launch applications faster than ever before, they may not always be thinking about the implications that this has on their organization's cloud costs. And we expect that this is going to accelerate in the coming years, as 95% of new digital initiatives will be hosted on cloud-native platforms. So that said, here at Datadog, we believe there's a lack of visibility into cloud spend for a few reasons. Cost data is not where your teams work, making it hard for your engineering teams to take ownership of and action on their costs. It is also siloed from your observability data, making it challenging for you to understand why your costs have changed. And as a result of all of this, we see that there's often a lack of cost awareness within your engineering teams and in your organization. So, introducing Datadog's cloud cost management. Let's talk a bit about why Datadog chose to tackle this problem. So, cost data should not be a hard to access kind of thing. Now, within Datadog, you can bring your costs to a place where your teams already work. This enables you to unify your cost data and your observability data so that your teams can contextualize their decisions and so that you can understand why your costs have changed. For example, you can see CPU and memory utilization data alongside instance costs, or you can see the number of reads and writes to S3 buckets along with their associated sizes and costs. And most importantly, as a result of all of this, you can create cost awareness for your engineering teams and empower them to include cost as another key performance indicator that they look at to understand the health of their services and their applications. So, using Datadog Cloud Cost Management, you can take control of your cloud costs and help create an efficient cloud environment for your organization. But don't take it from me. I'm going to turn it over to Martin so he can talk about how he's done this at StitchFix.
Cool. Thank you, Kayla. It's great to be here today. As Cody said, my name is Martin. I'm an engineer with StitchFix. My team and I are primarily focused on helping data scientists to kind of operationalize, scale, and observe various models and recommendation pipelines. Today, I want to tell you a little bit about our journey with Datadog Cloud Cost Management. For those that are unfamiliar, StitchFix is a personalized styling service that sits at the intersection between e-commerce and data, striving to solve the paradox of choice. Last year, I was part of a Tiger team that was created to take a look at the challenges and opportunities surrounding our technology spend. As you can see, we have a pretty large footprint and a wide array of technologies, so I hope you'll find some value in our story. It shouldn't come as a surprise, but in concert with a lot of the tech industry, the current macroeconomic environment has resulted in a rebalancing of how we prioritize our time and how disciplined we need to be around our OpEx. One of the values we practice at StitchFix is being an owner. However, it's really hard to own what you cannot measure, and it's impossible to apply accountability. Now, if I'm channeling my inner James Clear, laws 1 and 3 of creating a good habit are making it obvious and making it easy. We didn't do any of those things. We lacked consistency, so most folks didn't have access to cost data. Those that did probably didn't have access to the billing account, so reports became fragmented, and that kind of compounded because we weren't speaking the same language. That made them super unreliable. A key reason for this being that the tagging we did have was inconsistent between accounts and teams, like things like application versus app versus service, team versus owner, etc. Costs were not front and center, so it took a long time to notice regressions, and that was often in the form of kind of like finance being like, hey, the spend was up this month, we had to figure out who it was, where it was, etc. So Datadog certainly isn't the first vendor in this space, so why did we pick them for managing our costs? It's where we work. So in a prior life, I was forced to use a vendor that specialized in cloud costs. That was all they did. The UI felt like an afterthought, not a key value prop like we enjoyed at Datadog. Also, because I used it monthly, it always felt like I was swimming upstream, trying to remember exactly how I used the tool. Conversely, as engineers, we spend countless hours in Datadog, and the incremental knowledge required to explore and monitor cost data is super low. That consistency unlocks productivity. With regards to operationalizing cost, we'll touch on the specifics later, but I believe that cost should be treated as part of overall service health, and therefore having cost data adjacent to other operational metrics is non-negotiable. Longer term, super bullish on Kayla and her team that they're uniquely positioned to differentiate, capitalizing on the fact that we have the Datadog agent installed everywhere and they have massive amounts of data about our systems. I don't think it's too far-fetched to imagine a day whereby we can attach a dollar amount to a span, to flame graphs within the profiler, or to SQL queries in the database monitor. It's trivial to get started because from a procurement and implementation perspective, we already have an MSA, security, and legal approval, and just updating a couple of IAM policies to get started took mere minutes. Better still, all of our integrations like Slack, email, PagerDuty, whatever, come for free, so it's super easy to alert on any of our cost metrics. So how did we get started with Datadog? As I said at the start, you can't own what you can't measure. So we started by building a tagging strategy. There's no ambiguity about which tags we were committed to. Given that our CloudWatch data is already in Datadog, we're able to build dashboards to measure compliance and set up Slack monitors to alert us of outliers in near real time. This is great because given that cost data is generally at best nightly, it unlocks rapid iteration for closing gaps and eases maintenance burden. This graph here, you can see, shows number of EC2 instances by instance type and auto-scaling group that don't have a team attached. Now, of course, having a decade of infrastructure, we had a lot of work to do here. One of the primary ways we did this was by building a collection of node scripts that would leverage the AWS APIs to iterate through key resources like EC2, RDS, Elasticache, etc. Then, based on some fairly crude heuristics, attempt to automatically infer the correct tags like team and cost center. We'd then export that to a CSV, review it manually before iterating, closing any gaps, and then running an inverse script to take those tags and apply them to relevant resources within AWS. It's fairly simple, and there's a couple of examples in the GitHub link at the top of this slide here. Next, we have tags. So we have to kind of help our team visualize the data and make it actionable. Bringing cost data into a familiar and powerful tool not only improves visibility and awareness, but it unlocks some pretty novel capabilities, which so far I've been referring to as operationalizing cost. Let's take a look at how we did this. At a high level at the start, I mentioned we have tons of services, but as a platform, we only have a few shared clusters. So how do we kind of infer how much a particular application or team is spending in a large shared compute cluster? In this particular example, you can see we have ECS, EC2, and cost metrics in one formula. This allowed us to calculate the percentage of CPU time, memory time, GPU time, any of the above a particular application or team is using from a cluster, and then multiply that by the average amortized cost of the shared instances. Prior to CCM, we had a directional guess on this using kind of like rack rate estimates, but now this value includes like our enterprise discounts, spot instances, savings plans, etc. So it really helped us build confidence and trust in our graphs. Back to the first law of building good habits, make it obvious. We can leverage Powerpacks to attach cost data alongside our operational metrics in many dashboards automatically. For those that don't know, Powerpacks are essentially collections of widgets allowing you to increase the velocity and consistency for your teams building out their own dashboards. This is a particular example whereby after I added cost data for Postgres to this Powerpack on the screen, the team quickly realized that given the low utilization of the cluster, it was hard to justify spending $430 a day. The team organically resized this cluster and as a result achieved a 78% cost reduction. So now we can measure pretty well. How do we leverage our new data? One of my favorite examples is around data transfer. This is a dashboard that shows Amazon costs, but with a team filter. The first screenshot on the left breaks out EC2 spend by operation. And we observed that for this particular cluster, which is our most expensive cluster, almost 10% of the spend was into-zone data transfer costs. That's a ton of money just for moving a few bits between different buildings in North Virginia. The team was fairly surprised by this and got to dig in. The root cause being Spark shuffles, copying large amounts of data between instances. By ensuring the Spark executors for a particular job, which are usually training jobs or ETLs, things like that, running the same availability zone, we're able to cut this spend by around 85% and get some minor performance gains. When auditing spend that didn't have a team associated, I came across AWSConfig, which I'd never heard of. It's essentially a tool to assist with change management on AWS resources, and somebody turned this on years ago, probably as a test, for unknown reasons, and it was forgotten about. As we transitioned our workloads to EKS, the cost ballooned to hundreds of thousands a year due to the rate in which our workload mutates resources. This is things like attaching and detaching network interfaces, EBS volumes, etc. If you use config, I found Athena to be the easiest way to explore this data in S3. As you can see here, some EC2 instances would have these mutations up to 2,300 times a day. We worked with our security team and we were able to conclude that we had sufficient coverage from a compliance and auditing perspective with other tools such as CloudTrail. Therefore, we turned off config, allowing us to basically eliminate this spend. So ultimately, those were a couple of specific wins, but as the Tiger team disbands, how do we ensure there is lasting impact? Short term, we're able to accelerate our attribution and visibility into spend, allowing us to capitalize on lots of low-hanging fruit. Longer term, we've empowered all of our engineers to observe and monitor costs as part of their overall service health, increasing ownership of costs and encouraging fiscal responsibility. Ultimately, if we can do more with less, then we can do more. Now back to Kayla. She'll tell us a little bit about how Datadog used cloud cost management internally to find opportunities for optimization.
Nice. Thank you, Martin. So today I'm going to talk about a very specific use case where our CloudOps team at Datadog used the Datadog Cloud Cost Management product to reduce our S3 costs and got our engineering teams to take action. So quickly, an overview of our S3 environment. We have many buckets and many different access patterns. We expect that there will be many more buckets that get created with new use cases and that the configurations of those buckets will vary and that they should. So based on the state of our storage, we knew that we wanted to be more efficient. So our overall goal was to be more efficient. One approach to this is to email and broadcast best practices and hope that this results in action. So you can tell your engineering teams, auto-scale your workflows, turn off your idle machines, buy commitments to reduce operating costs. But what we learned is that simply sharing these best practices doesn't usually result in a lot of action, and it can be distracting for our teams. So what did we do internally to empower our engineers to take action, in this case on S3? So after speaking to our teams, what we learned is that a lot of time it was really uncertainty that was preventing them from taking action. They already knew what the best practices were, but they often didn't feel like they had the context to de-risk some of the decisions that they were wanting to make. So we found that a lot of them were asking questions like, well, how much does this thing cost today? And do the costs even matter? And how do we actually make it cheaper? How do we take action? And in the cost world, you really don't want to take on every efficiency initiative. You just don't. There are many opportunities. What you really want to do is focus on the ones that are going to drive significant value for your business and to help create that context and certainty for your engineering team so that they can focus on those opportunities and take action. So how do we do that? Well, first, what we did was find good candidates for S3 buckets that would have a large impact if we asked our teams to update these buckets to cold storage. And you can see here on this graph that we use Datadog to estimate what our savings could look like if we moved these buckets to cold storage. Next, what we did was build out a dashboard that helped communicate with context to our teams so that they could understand the impact of their actions, but also feel comfortable with moving their buckets to cold storage. So you can see here that we have a dashboard where we've graphed a bunch of metrics that help them identify if their bucket is a good candidate for cold storage. And we can see, for example, the daily spend of the bucket. We can see what percentage of that bucket cost is associated with standard storage and things like the daily gets as a percentage of the overall buckets in the storage. So TLDR was that if all of these boxes are green, we are communicating to our engineering teams that this particular bucket was a good candidate for cold storage. And the reality was that giving them this context, putting this information in front of them, helped them feel comfortable to take action. But we wanted not just to ask them to take action, but also to show them the impact and the results from their taking action. And so we can see here that we are tracking the reduced cost using Datadog Cloud Cost Management, and we can see some nice cost reduction in this graph, and we were able to share this back out with our engineering teams. So how do we set the foundation for lasting change and make sure that this wasn't just a one-time effort? Using the same CCM query from the original dashboard, we now have a monitor in place that will alert on any bucket that breaches the threshold that we've defined. And based on this monitor, we can open Jira tickets, send Slack messages, emails, etc. And the idea is that we have a repeatable way and a repeatable process to help drive action around this particular cost savings opportunity. So to sum it all up, we were able to reduce uncertainty for our engineering teams, which helped them drive actions that resulted in cost-saving opportunities for Datadog. And we were able to build a process directly into Datadog using Datadog Cloud Costs that helped ensure that these changes would be long-lasting for our organization and for our teams. Okay, so that concludes all of the content that we have today. Let's recap what has been discussed. Using Datadog Cloud Cost Management, we saw that Martin was able to create cost awareness for his engineering team and ultimately drive a culture of cost ownership for his organization. And that by simply putting cost data in front of his engineering teams using Powerpacks, he was able to recognize some pretty significant cost savings for his organization. Similarly, on the Datadog side, we were able to communicate with context to our teams and help create awareness for our engineering organization. And this resulted in them taking action and, again, drove cost savings for our organization. And lastly, in both cases, we were able to build a foundation for lasting changes by embedding cost consciousness into the fabric of our engineering organization. And over to Q&A.
Awesome. Martin, Kayla, let's go ahead and just start tackling these questions from the top. So it looks like this first one is for Martin. What other costs does StitchFix plan on optimizing in 2023?
We still have a ton of work to do. We actually saved almost 40% doing exactly what Kayla described. Honestly, with the checkbox, pretty much turning on S3 kind of intelligent tiering, which was awesome. But we still have a ton of data in S3 that probably is duplicate, unused, etc. So we kind of need to get better about that. Part of that will be empowerment. Sometimes people spin up a data set and they just want to test something, like test a theory, make a model, whatever, but we should give them the ability to A, see how much that costs, and B, attach a TTL, right? I need this for 30 days or 60 days, or whatever that is. That applies to partitions too. Like lots of times we only need data for the trailing 90 days, but it's not super easy for people to go in and make that configuration. So we need to get better at that. Secondly, we organizationally have been distinct for our data scientists and our sort of consumer-facing engineering teams. Think the iOS app, the website, things like that. As a result, we have two distinct platforms, but they have a ton of overlap. So there's a really big opportunity for us to converge those platforms and have less compute clusters, don't run multiple Kafka pipelines, et cetera, which will let us reclaim tons of engineering hours, optimizing our costs, and creating leverage for engineers building on the platform by unifying these systems.
So Martin, outside of cloud cost management, how do you establish that culture of cost ownership? How has StitchFix been doing that? And what steps or processes have you specifically been seeing?
I think it's fairly easy for us in a way. Like we hire amazing people, right? And people have good intentions. We've just historically made it really hard for them to do the right things. So by exposing the data, putting it front and center, I think that we've already observed, like with the 78% reduction that I showed earlier on one of those RES instances, there are tons of other instances where people just by being enabled, like seeing the data, knowing what a thing costs, they've been kind of self-improving. Another example would be we've historically optimized for velocity and developer experience, which is absolutely the right thing to do, and it's still super important to us. But that meant that you could just be like, hey, I want 500 GPUs to train this model, which might make you go quite fast. But we didn't really show you that you're only using 10% of those. You could go and find it, but we're working on ways to make that easier and kind of like Kayla showed with the monitors, alert people that just with some minor tweaks, we can be a lot more responsible fiscally.
So I think this is more for the Datadog side, but can you tell us more about what's coming up for cloud cost management?
Sure. So I would say there are a couple big focus areas for our team. One is expanding to support multiple clouds. So we currently have support for AWS in the product, but we recently launched a private beta for Azure and plan to expand to GCP in the second half of the year. We are also making a large investment in container cost allocation, and we'll soon be launching a cost optimization product that will put very specific optimization opportunities directly into the product for teams to take a look at and take action on.
So Kayla, are there other key elements of the roadmap that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I covered sort of the big roadmap items. I'd say the other one that might be interesting to take a look out for is more robust support for cost monitors, as we were talking about before.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so this looks to be our last question. The attendee asks, we use AWS Cost Explorer a lot. Can you expand on the value of using cloud cost management over the native tools AWS provides?
I can start. I think, again, it comes back to making it easy, making it obvious. Like, we use Datadog for all of our metrics because we find the ergonomics and the observability features it provides to be superior than CloudWatch for us. However, you literally can't ingest the cost explorer data into CloudWatch. Therefore, you can't intersect the metrics like with some of the kind of graphs I showed before. Secondly, I think that there are various limitations, like you can only aggregate by one field in Cost Explorer. Conversely, you can aggregate by 3 fields in CCM. So there's some of the things that we've really enjoyed using.
Nice. The other thing I'll expand on what Martin said, and something, Martin, you actually talked about, and we do hear from a number of our customers, is that just even getting access to Cost Explorer across the various AWS accounts can be very challenging for teams. And with Datadog, it's very easy to just log in and get access to cost data for any of your engineers using Datadog directly. Plus, I think the Datadog dashboarding capabilities, along with formulas and functions, which Martin highlighted before, is a key differentiator for us as well.
Plus multi-vendor, right? I think that's another. If you are multi-cloud, then you have to use a vendor.
Right. That's a good point.
Well, Martin, Kayla, thank you both so much for bringing everything that you brought to the table today. Before we do close out and before I give away some gift cards, I did just want to give each of you one more opportunity to leave the audience with any closing remarks or anything that you feel they really need to leave this program knowing.
I feel like I've been preaching atomic habits without actually telling anyone. So if you didn't get the James Clear reference and the laws of creating good habits, you should totally read Atomic Habits. It's a great book.
Nice. I think the one thing I would say is that, and we've been talking about this all day, but Datadog's an observability platform, and it's not a cost management tool. It's an observability platform that also has cost data. And so I think the one thing to take away here is that cost data should be treated as just another key metric that your teams are looking at to monitor the health of their services and their applications. And what we've seen is that when organizations and teams have access to cost and embrace including costs as another metric, we've seen that magic occurs. People want to do the right thing. They have access to the information. They take action, and that cloud environment becomes significantly more efficient simply by putting data in front of those teams. So that would be my one thing for you to take away. If you want to start using the Datadog Cloud Cost Management product, you can sign up for a free trial and scan one of the QR codes here on the screen. Setup takes as little as 15 minutes, and it's super easy to configure AWS cost show up in the Datadog Cloud Cost Management product. If you're in a multi-cloud environment, you can also request access to our private beta of Azure, and we'll share a link out for that in a follow-up email. And finally, if you want to learn more about how organizations are finding opportunities for cost optimization and implementing best practices for cost ownership, we'll send a link out to an upcoming roundtable about a cost webinar on February 2nd that Datadog is hosting.
Awesome. Well, Kayla and Martin, thank you so much for joining us today. I know there actually were plenty more questions that we received that we weren't able to get to. So if your question went unanswered, we are going to make sure that these do get sent over to Martin and Kayla, and hopefully they can get back to you with an appropriate answer. But to everyone who has joined us today, thank you so much for being here. I'll just remind you that this session was recorded. So following this, you should receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand. Or, of course, you can find it living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars. I do still have those 4 $25 Amazon gift cards to give out. Our winners are Kathy S., Arno J., Sephora N., and Ariel C. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. However, if you don't happen to see that email, do check your spam folder. Give it a couple days. We're in office this week, and so it might just be a slight delay on getting those emails out. But to Martin and Kayla, thank you both so much. To Datadog and AWS, thank you for sponsoring our program. And of course, to everyone who's been with us for the last 30 minutes, I really appreciate your time. And we at the Techstrong group really appreciate you being here. We also really appreciate your feedback. So as soon as we close out, there will be a survey that pops up on your screen. Feel free to fill that out. Let us know what you liked about today's program. Let us know what you'd like to see on a future program. We want to hear from you. Otherwise, I hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong learning program. Have a great rest of your day, and everyone may now disconnect.